when police officers are at fault, the innocent victim of them has to be not only charged but convicted of allegedly assaulting a police officer in obstruction. And this ties in with my story, with the 2 wrongful convictions that I have against me from Calgary, Alberta. Why is there a need to have the innocent person convicted? Because that is the defense for a lawsuit. Because if someone is convicted, for example, of assaulting a police officer in obstruction, then the individual, the victim to everything, caused their own injuries. To expand on this a little bit more, you can say that the officer was defending himself while he was on duty and had to do whatever it took to subdue the individual. Did you know I was personally dragged into the whistleblowing about the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at the nonprofit organization with a false accusation by the female central to my story? I had support from some famous people like...
One man told me about being beaten by the police and left permanently disabled because of a woman's false allegation.
Hello, it's November 2024. Now this video is inspired by a conversation that I recently had at the time of recording this video. And it's about a topic that I've discussed in other videos with regards to my career history, for example. And there's actually 2 different things that we were talking about, among many other different things, of course. But he had brought up a recent case in the US, and it really got my attention, and you'll find out why in a moment. But before I get into that, really, I want to just briefly mention again, this is being brought up during our conversation about how there are skip tracers and how these people can literally find out what you eat for breakfast. And we were talking about that briefly as well. And the information that these professional skip tracers can obtain is very, very scary. And I remember when I first started using them, for example, usually for the debt recovery portion of litigation, a lawsuit, I was taken back by what they can learn about you. Now, there's a lot of talk about among the commoner with privacy acts and everything else, and how people's personal information is private. Well, really, that information, your private information, is protected from, for example, your neighbor obtaining that information. But when it comes to, I'm just trying to think of a descriptive, people above the commoner status, your information is not protected at all. And when I say that they can find out what you have for breakfast, I mean that literally. For example, a really good skip tracer can find out where you do your groceries. And all those transactions, everything that's scanned shows up on a list somewhere. Now, when you have your printout of your receipt and you make the payment, it itemizes everything. Imagine someone having access to that, and for example, they see that you buy Cheerios on a regular basis. Well, chances are you're eating Cheerios for breakfast. And that's not just with, for example, groceries. It could be a clothing store. It could be at a Canadian Tire for those in Canada. And these same skip tracers are in the USA too. It's not just exclusive to Canada. And I remember one time talking with a skip tracing firm. They were able to find someone way northern Ontario, someone completely off grid, only using cash, and the cash that they would obtain would be from doing, for example, I would assume local work. And there was no trace of them, no banking, no debit machine usage, nothing. They had no electricity, no water, nothing. They were completely off grid. And this firm was able to find them in the middle of nowhere. And that was needed to be able to serve them documents. Now, just remember, this is a long time ago, in the mid-2000s. And I believe this person was reduced to having to live off grid. And I'm sure it was a struggle for them, but to be able to find someone who basically, as a descriptive, fell off the map, that's some scary stuff. And the information that you can obtain is banking records. And sometimes you don't even have to use a skip tracing company. You just have to know the right people. For example, you can call a bank and know the right people and get access to someone's banking information. For example, if you needed to garnish their accounts or whatever, find out when deposits are made, or if there was a will involved, anything else. It's really, really scary stuff. So when you think that your information is protected, it really isn't. It's only protected between the commoners. And, just thinking about it, it kind of reminds me of that movie with Will Smith. I believe it was called Public Enemy, or Enemy of the State. That's it, Enemy of the State. And how easily information is accessed. Keep in mind, these are private firms being able to do this. Could you imagine what a governing body can do with even more resources, unlimited resources? And I was going to segue for a quick moment. People, when they go online especially, they think that using fake names and fake pictures and whatever, just having a fake account, is protecting them from the government, for example. That is complete delusion, because they already know who you are and your fake accounts and everything else if you become a person of interest. And usually you become a person of interest for a limited time, limited period. It's not like an ongoing thing. And this I've discussed in other videos, how people become delusional, where they may have been a person of interest because of an affiliation, for example, a temporary affiliation with a movement, and they were questioned. Whatever happens. What people think that they're hiding, they're not hiding from anything. It's completely delusional. Now, what I really want to talk about in this video is a story about, and I don't know anything about this individual or his YouTube channel or anything else. My friend was telling me about this person, and what really got my attention was how this person was sued by these so-called doctors or scientists regarding some alleged nonsensical environmental things, because they were dealing with, this channel was dealing with diesel engines and diesel trucks, and how black smoke comes out and everything else. And anyway, the lawsuit was won by these so-called doctors, scientists, and they were trying to, this YouTuber was paying that off. But there was a bit of a twist here, because the lawyer wanted, obviously, costs. Now, when you lose a lawsuit, you have to pay the other party's legal costs. And what this lawyer did was completely took advantage of it, because there was no limit to it, and dragged this on and on and on, and just started racking up alleged costs. And we're trying to impose that on this YouTuber, which is insane to even think about, as being very, very dishonest. And now there are recourses that this individual, this YouTuber, could have against this lawyer, but that's something else. That's a different topic. There's at least 4 to 5 ways that this, for example, lawyer can be held accountable. And apparently some other lawyers from other firms had jumped in to cash in on it because it was basically easy money, or they thought it was easy money. Now, what really got my attention about this was how this lawyer was using contempt to basically put this person in jail until they satisfied repaying of their costs. Now, set aside whether the costs were just or not, that's not the point. But I've talked about, for example, in the mid-2000s, when I specialized in debt recovery, and I looked into using contempt to basically pressure someone to pay a debt, because at least in Canada it's anywhere from 1 to 40 days in jail. Now, this ties in with what used to be called debtor prison, which was abolished because basically that's insanity, and I resurrected that by using contempt. And I've stated how I've watched this monster grow over time, to the point now where I see, even in this story, how this lawyer completely took it to a whole new level, and it completely abused this tactic of using contempt to pressure someone to pay a debt, to satisfy a debt. And it was completely wrong. And I watched the video about this guy telling his story about why he went to jail and everything else. Luckily, in the end, there is, from what I understand, a happy ending where he had everything overturned, and this judge, seeing, finally, according to him, seeing how this lawyer was really abusing the process and using this contempt to, in his words, extort this YouTuber who lost this case with regards to the environment and everything else, which is just all nonsense to begin with. One of the things that he highlights is that none of that money that they won goes back to trying to save the environment, but I digress. Really, this environmental thing, like most anything else, pretty much everything else in this world, is all about making money. But that's a whole different topic. And I explained, for example, in the mid-2000s, as far as I knew then and know now, I was the first person to use contempt to enforce a debt, basically resurrecting debtor prison. And I explained in videos, during that time, my intention wasn't to be evil or do anything wicked. There was a problem that needed to be solved. For example, collecting debts, and debtors became more and more smart with regards to not paying the debt or avoid paying the debt. So how do you get someone to pay a debt? You have to apply some pressure. And there's other tactics that I used as well, which almost all the time were successful. But as far as I know, in the mid-2000s, I was the first. And as I said, since I watched this monster grow into complete insanity, to the point now, again, where this lawyer took it to a whole new level of abuse. Now, when I was talking with my friend, because we've talked about this over the years, whenever it comes up, and they mentioned, for example, how this is just extortion. When you threaten someone with jail to pay a debt, it's extortion. I can understand how that could be interpreted as extortion, but I can also obviously see how it's not considered extortion. It's solving a problem, or trying to solve a problem. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below if you think that something like this is extortion. I'm gonna say that most people are going to say yes, it is. But there's a difference between extortion and enforcing a debt. And one can say, well, yeah, just because something is illegally done doesn't mean it's not extortion. I get that. I can see both sides of the argument very clearly. I just want to talk about this because, for me anyway, there seems to be kind of an update with regards to this YouTuber's story and how contempt for a debt, not paying a debt, was totally misused, and how this monster is still growing. And I'm just going to close off by saying, for example, looking back, I'm not proud of my efforts then, but it is what it is, and there's nothing that can be done to change it. However, when you create something like that, you also know how to, as a descriptive, counter something like that. And perhaps this is what I could offer to the commoner. But then I go back to, is the commoner worth any effort? Because from where I sit now, the commoner deserves what they get. Anyway, hopefully you found this interesting. Be sure to look up this guy's story. And yeah, this is the world that we live in. This is reality. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Just remember, I was one man against many. Fighting a losing battle, but I still fought to the end.
That means press on. That means endure. That means God cannot fail, and you're not going to give up. That's not an option for a child of God. This means you are going to be numbered. Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.